Hey, West Michigan, Congresswoman Scholten here, back with another episode of Straight Talk with Scholten. Such a busy week, we actually had to do two. So the longest shutdown in American history is finally over after the House voted last night on a deal to reopen the government. I voted against it because it is a raw deal for the American people that does nothing to lower the cost of health care. I talked about the vote more in my last video. We've got a link for you here. Today, I am not here to talk about the past. I'm here to talk about what comes next. Many are asking, what does this mean? So let's get into it. First, what does this mean for SNAP benefits? The White House Budget Office has insisted that this week beneficiaries will see their accounts fully restored within hours of the federal government reopening. I will be watching closely to make sure that happens. The nearly 30,000 Michiganders who work for the federal government will go back to work, and they will receive back pay for the duration of the shutdown. We're also coming up on a busy holiday travel season. So I want to make sure that you are read in on what this means for air travel. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy will have to lift the mandated flight restrictions at 40 airports around the country. He also promised that air traffic controllers will receive 70% of their paychecks within 24 to 48 hours after the government shutdown ends. That deadline is coming up. And as a member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, I will be fulfilling my oversight duties to ensure that our hardworking air traffic controllers get what they are owed. Let me be clear. I am glad that federal workers will be getting paid. This shutdown should have never happened. We need to make sure that SNAP benefits continue to flow. I support a bipartisan bill and an amendment that was made to this funding package that the federal government can never, ever use hunger as a bargaining chip again. My Senate Republican colleagues, they dropped a last-minute provision into this bill that made it absolutely untenable to vote for, making it so that if this continuing resolution, when it passes into law, they could potentially be entitled to millions in taxpayer-funded payouts. This involves 8 senators who were investigated for their role in the January 6, 2021 insurrection. 8 senators all voted to shove taxpayer dollars into their own pockets, $500,000 for each time their records were inspected. And reports indicate that these 8 senators will be paid at least $1 million each, but potentially more. At least $1 million guaranteed. Senator Lindsey Graham, Bill Hagerty, Josh Hawley, Dan Sullivan, Tommy Tuberville, Ron Johnson, Cynthia Loomis, and Marsha Blackburn. Remember their names. This is dangerous for our democracy. It is a flagrant misuse of your taxpayer dollars. I cannot and will not support legislation that incentivizes co-conspirators to an insurrection with a taxpayer-funded windfall. And for the big question on this bill that so many are asking, what about healthcare? This deal also does nothing to address the expiring ACA tax credits that will send insurance premiums skyrocketing. House Leader Jeffries and Whip Catherine Clark have introduced a 3-year extension of the ACA enhanced premium tax credits as a bill, also did it as an amendment, and attached a discharge petition that would force a vote on the House floor. I was one of the first to sign this discharge petition. If it can get 218 signatures, it will force a vote in the House. Now, remember, the Senate also guaranteed as part of a deal for reopening the government that they would have a vote on the Senate floor, but so far no word on that. I believe that these subsidies should be extended in the short term to protect care. But in the long run, we need to do so much more on making healthcare more affordable and accessible. But we need to think bigger about major policy changes. I'm working every day on a small and large scale fix that would lower healthcare costs for you. And I want to hear from you about what are the aspects of your care that are costing so much money. I'm throwing all kinds of ideas out there, again, from small and medium. I had a clean extension of the ACA tax credits, and then I also introduced 2 of my own bills. The Catch It Act, which would help rural health facilities provide better preventative screenings, and my Fair Price Drug Device Act, which lowers the cost of things like insulin pumps and EpiPens. Republicans could have accepted either one of these bills. Again, they are bipartisan, included them into the bill and done something concrete about lowering healthcare costs, but they didn't. West Michigan, I am committed to working for you. We see where the priorities are. And next week, I'll be getting back to Washington again and getting right back to work. Take care.
Now at 6, federal workers are starting to file back into the office less than 24 hours after the longest government shutdown ever finally ended.
And their return comes after 43 days of no pay. ANF political reporter Doug Reardon is live tonight at downtown Atlanta. And Doug, they must be feeling some relief.
Certainly, undoubtedly, being back on the job has given these employees a lot of relief, knowing that some money is coming to them. They have been without pay for 43 days, and we know that some of these federal workers who were furloughed will start receiving their checks as soon as this weekend. But remember, the bill that Congress passed last night only funds the government through January 30th. So in 11 weeks, we could be right back in this same situation.
With my signature, the federal government will now resume normal operations.
After 43 days, the federal government reopened Wednesday night.
I was under no illusions about what was going to happen last night.
Despite the efforts of Democrats, the continuing resolution did not include an extension of health care subsidies used by over 1 million Georgians. Democratic Congressman Hank Johnson says it could cause premiums to rise as high as 2,000% next year when they expire.
It's quite serious what we're facing here, and this is a fight that we're going to continue to have as Democrats.
But the bill did get federal workers back on the job. Most haven't been paid since early October.
At some point in time, you run out of resources.
Antonio Gaines, a housing and urban development worker here in Atlanta and a union rep for federal employees, said it was uncomfortable for a while. But with the threat of another shutdown just 11 weeks away,
I'm telling my colleagues, hey, I know the holidays are here. We like to travel. We like to eat good. Be judicious in your finances because we very well may find ourselves in a similar situation January 30th, February 1st.
Gaines feels it was a shortage of air traffic controllers and pesky flight disruptions that finally got lawmakers to cut a deal in D.C.
Thank you from the American.
The Trump administration seemed to think that was the tipping point, too. On Thursday in Houston, they handed out $10,000 bonus checks to TSA and air traffic control workers who stayed on the job through their furloughs.
But also they're going to get a bonus check for stepping up, taking on extra shifts, for showing up each and every day, for serving the American people.
And we haven't been told how much or if workers at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the world's busiest, will be receiving those bonuses as well. One other note to make that I feel is important. We talked a lot about SNAP benefits disappearing because the program wasn't funded. Last night's continuing resolution does fund that program through 2026. So if we were to face another shutdown at the end of January, those beneficiaries would not be impacted in the same way they were this time around. We're in downtown Atlanta. Doug Reardon, Atlanta News First.
Hey, Senator, first let's talk about the vote. What changed 6 weeks into the shutdown?
Well, the Democrats, I believe, finally realized something that was bad for the country, that, they in the past had said that if we want to negotiate health care, it should not be done within the context of a government shutdown. And so a number of the moderates, I think, came over to say that with what was going on, for example, with air traffic controllers, that it was time to get government reopened. And, we actually negotiated a deal with them that we would have some appropriations bills as a part of this. So we're pushing forward on that part of it. They also, for example, the White House agreed to make sure we were paying all the furloughed people, and that anybody who had been fired since October 1st would be rehired. So they got some things out of it. It's good to get the government reopened, get people paid, especially people like our air traffic controllers, our law enforcement officers, all the folks who are working these past more than 5 weeks without getting paid. So this is a good deal for the country, and we're going to see if we can't get the rest of the votes that we need to do in the Senate done either tonight or tomorrow, and then get the House back in here so they can vote on it and get it to the president's desk.
So you talked a little bit about what's included and what you voted for. Are there some elements of compromise from your side?
Well, what we're doing is really, we're put the appropriations bills in here. I think the things that the Democrats got out of it, again, had to do with the furloughed employees and the people who had been laid off during the shutdown. And, the rest of the bills that we put in here, these appropriation bills, they were already bipartisan bills, right? They'd all come out of the Appropriations Committee with both Republican and Democrat votes. These bills had already been voted on the floor of the Senate and had been passed. There were a few amendments to them with regard to, additional things we wanted to see to be able to get them through that as well. So There were conference with the House. And so generally these are all bipartisan bills where both Republicans and Democrats.
43 days. That's 3 days longer than the 40 days and nights Noah spent in the Ark. Texas and all Americans are forced to wait while Democrats play political games with people's livelihoods. But I'll tell you this, congressional Republicans never wavered. We stayed united. We stood our ground for the folks who got up every morning, go to work, pay their taxes, and keep this country moving. We said no to the left's reckless plan to pile on another $1.5 trillion in wasteful spending. Through every one of those 7 tough weeks, it was the American people who held the line. Moms and dads stretching every dollar, small businesses keeping their doors open, and our great service members standing tall as Democrats turned their backs on them. The American spirit didn't quit, and neither did we. Now the government's open, and it's time to get back to work, to fund our troops, support our veterans, secure our border, and keep this great nation growing. This is about principle. Americans deserve leaders who mean what they say and actually stand firm when it counts. And I'm proud to say that Republicans did exactly that. We held the line, we kept our promise, and we'll keep fighting for the greatest nation on God's green earth.
Hey everyone, we are back in Washington, D.C. to reopen the government. I'm sure you've seen the news, but Democrats finally caved on their shutdown. And make no mistake, this was a Democrat shutdown from the very beginning. Catherine Clark said, sure, we know families are going to suffer, but this is the only leverage we have. Chuck Schumer said, every day gets better for us as long as the shutdown is going on. So they were willing to use American pain for their own leverage. And for what? In the end, Democrats caved. Now they're incredibly incensed and big mad and divided. They want Chuck Schumer gone. But what happened in the middle? We didn't do anything different than what we've been talking about before. So we're going to reopen the government, put Americans back to work, and continue to deliver for you, the American people.
Defiance of the president. With us now is the House Minority Leader, Democrat Hakeem Jeffries. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. So it does look like this vote will be next week. What do you think it will tell us? Where are the numbers right now?
Well, good morning. Great to be with you. It's my expectation that the legislation will pass, potentially pass decisively. Democrats in the House, of course, will strongly support it. We believe in transparency. We believe it's been far too long that this information has been hidden from the American people. And it's extraordinary that rather than focus on trying to actually extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, drive down the high cost of living, or make life better for the American people, Donald Trump and his folks have spent this week pressuring Republicans not to back the effort to release these Jeffrey Epstein files to the American people.
Now, this week, Republican Congressman Tim Burchett, once it was clear that the discharge petition would get enough votes, Tim Burchett tried to actually get a vote on the House floor this week. And through House procedures, apparently it would have required leadership on both sides to sign on. House Speaker Mike Johnson says you wouldn't sign on to having a vote this week. Why not?
Yeah, that's actually inaccurate. It appears to me Mike Johnson didn't reach out. He spent 7 weeks stopping Representative Adelita Grijalva from being sworn in. And the reason why they were on vacation, a taxpayer-funded vacation for 7 weeks, is because they had no answers for the American people on the health care crisis that Republicans have created, and they were unwilling to swear in Representative Adelita Grijalva because they knew she would be the 218th signature to trigger this up or down vote. So I have no idea what Mike Johnson is talking about.
It is interesting to me that as we're talking about this, you keep on turning the discussion back to health care and affordability. What risks are there, do you think, for Democrats in spending too much time on Epstein as opposed to these bread and butter, kitchen table issues for the American people?
Well, we have to focus on a variety of different issues that we know are important to the American people. And the American people deserve better than the extremism that has been unleashed on them from day one of this presidency. And it certainly is the case that we're going to continue to focus on driving down the high cost of living in this country. America is far too expensive. The American people all across the country have made that clear repeatedly. Housing costs too high, grocery costs too high, child care costs too high, electricity bills through the roof, and of course, healthcare premiums about to skyrocket for tens of millions of Americans because of Republican inaction. But at the same period of time, we've made clear we also need to address the rampant corruption that we see in Washington, D.C., coming out of the Trump administration and enabled repeatedly by Donald Trump's sycophants in the House Republican Conference. And as part of that, transparency, sunlight, of course, is the best disinfectant. And we've maintained from the very beginning that the American people just deserve the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth as it relates to the Epstein files that Donald Trump and his minions made a big deal about for years, but now all of a sudden that they're in office, they're trying to bury this information.
The government obviously now open. It had been shut down for some time. Democrats trying to get an extension of the Obamacare subsidies. When this continuing resolution runs out at the end of January, if there is not an extension of the Obamacare subsidies, what do you want Democrats to do? More importantly, what do you want, I suppose, the Senate to do?
Well, let's take one step at a time. The Affordable Care Act tax credits are scheduled to lapse on December 31st. And so we have about 45 days to get this done. House Democrats have introduced legislation to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for 3 years to provide working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyday Americans the certainty that they need, that they'll be able to actually go see a doctor when they need to see one for themselves, their families, or their children. In an environment where Republicans have launched an all-out assault on the health care of the American people, the largest cut to Medicaid in American history. Hospitals and nursing homes and community-based health centers are closing all throughout America. Now they refuse to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, John. So we've got to work on this issue over the next 45 days, and we're going to continue to press the case.
And if you don't succeed?
Well, the appropriations process is going to proceed on a separate track, and that's being led, of course, by our appropriators, Rosa DeLauro on the House Democratic side, who's doing a great job, working with our Senate colleagues. And we're going to try to enact bipartisan spending agreements that actually meet the needs of the American people, focused on improving their quality of life and, of course, driving down the high cost of living to deal with the Trump affordability crisis that exists in America right now.
I mean, you know politics. You've been in it for a while, and you know this is the type of question that does get asked after a shutdown like this. Who won the shutdown?
Well, the American people lost because Republicans made a decision intentionally. They control the House, the Senate, and the presidency, that they'd rather shut the government down than actually provide affordable health care to everyday Americans all across the country, including in the states that are going to be most affected, which happen to be states like West Virginia, Wyoming, Alaska, Mississippi, Tennessee, Texas, South Carolina, Alabama, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Those are the 10 states most affected by the failure to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And Republicans have been able to do everything else, including finding $40 billion to bail out Argentina, but unwilling to find a dime to actually provide affordable health care to everyday Americans. And so hopefully they'll adopt a different approach. And we're going to continue to press the case on these core issues of making life better for everyday Americans in a country that is far too expensive, far too many people struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. They can't thrive and can barely survive. This should not be the case in the wealthiest country in the history of the world.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, we do appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
I think it's incredibly clear that Republicans will stop at nothing to avoid the disclosure of this information. So what that means is 218 signatures were reached despite White House efforts, even at the 11th hour, to summon people down to the White House to try to get them to remove their signatures. Those members said no. And so our rules indicate at 218, members get a vote. We're interested in every member in this chamber putting their vote up, either yes or a no. And then we'll see what happens from there.
Farming is tough. Both it's physically demanding and, folks are getting up early, but it's also tough because there are all of these factors that are out of the control of the farmer. They're having to deal with the uncertainty of weather. They're having to deal with the uncertainty of the international space. They're trying to navigate all of this. And the last thing they need is the uncertainty being created by these tariffs. And it's the uncertainty being created by nonsensical policy of importing Argentinian beef.
Mills Coffee is a storied family business. They have provided generations of Rhode Islanders with their coffee for well over a century. And they've seen lots of ups and downs in that century, but they're experiencing something now that is really unprecedented. And that's President Trump causing recklessly major price shocks to the coffee business. He's slapping tariffs on all manner of goods, increasing costs and putting Americans out of business. Susan shared with me that the Trump tariffs are costing her company around $30,000 each month. Going forward. And that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. It's going to have to be passed on somewhere. There's just no way a company small business can absorb that kind of money. And that's why I sponsored legislation in the Senate, the No Coffee Tax Act, which would reverse these Trump tariff imposed on coffee prices. And our bipartisan bill would repeal these tariffs and prevent them from implementing new ones.
So I'm really happy about this. And just to make it aware, because there's a couple of steps that go from drinking your cup to when you get to drink it in your cup. There's been an awful lot going on before that. And we need to be able to get that out to people because it's wrong. I'm sure it's wrong on a lot of products.
Thank you, Mr. Cole, for yielding the time. Mr. Speaker, over 40 days after the Senate Democrats shut down the federal government, we are finally reopening. The result of the shutdown has been thousands of employee furloughs, major disruptions to our air travel, service members going without pay, delayed food assistance for low-income individuals and families, and much, much more. Mr. Speaker, as a member of the House Appropriations Committee, the responsibility of funding the federal government is one that I take very seriously, especially in light of our nation's debt surpassing $38 trillion. The performative tactics that we have watched over the last 7 weeks have truly been a disservice to Americans. And my friends across the aisle should never have put leverage or politics over those people that they represent. But the most important thing right now is that we get back to work, making sure the federal government can provide the essential services that people depend on, and that Congress can continue working to pass full-year funding legislation providing responsible federal spending and fund those essential services. Mr. Speaker, we are making significant progress with the inclusion of these 3 appropriation bills, but our work is far from over. I encourage all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this deal, vote to end this unnecessary shutdown, and help us get back to the business of hardworking Americans across this country. Thank you, and I yield back.
Not too shocking. Donald Trump's in the Epstein files. Remarkable how the whole MAGA world is being turned on its head. And finally, it looks like the American people are going to get the truth. And boy, oh boy, the truth shall set you free. We'll see. But there seems to be a reason why the White House has been dreading this whole affair so outrageously. The American people deserve to know, and then people need to be held accountable.
Kathy on Facebook asks, if the Republicans want to do away with the ACA, what, if any, alternatives are they presenting? Or are they just going to leave us in the dust?
Kathy, that's a great question. And here's the answer. They have no clue what they're doing. We know since the Affordable Care Act passed, the Republicans had had no health care plan alternative. In fact, they've talked about having a plan. They've tried many times to get rid of the Affordable Care Act under Speakers Ryan and Boehner, but they've never had an alternative plan. Even Donald Trump, when he was in a debate with Vice President Harris, they asked about a health care plan, and he said they have a concept of a plan. And yet we've never seen that concept either. So what the Republicans did essentially is, in the big ugly law, they went in, they cut 15 million people's access to health care, largely through the Affordable Care Act and through the Medicaid plan. And they triggered, by the way, a $500 billion cut to Medicare that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. And all of those actions have made insurance companies look at other uncovered costs they're going to have, and that raised all of our health insurance costs. So the simple answer to your question is Republicans have no alternative. I think the bigger question is, why would you cut health insurance from 15 million people and raise everyone's rates along the way when you have no alternative? And they really have not had an alternative. And that's what the shutdown fight was largely about. We were trying to get those tax credits, those subsidies extended for people. Otherwise, we know that people are going to have their premiums go up $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month in some cases, especially people who are in that 57 to 65 age category. Depending on what plan you're on, they're going to see some of the biggest increases. So to do this without an alternative seems hapless and irresponsible. But the fact that they know they had no alternative and still did this, and then still fought us throughout this last 40 some days that we've had a shutdown, just shows how little the Republicans care about you and your family. And I think everyone knows, one of the most important things for any family economically is having healthcare. Can you afford your rent or mortgage? Do you have healthcare for your family? Can you maybe take that family vacation? If you don't have those economic fundamentals, you're not getting by, and you're not living the American dream, the American promise. And Republicans really don't care about that promise. And don't forget, the reason they did all of this, why they took away healthcare, why they took away $180+ billion worth of food assistance through the SNAP program, all of that was to give a tax break to billionaires and to Republican donors. So having no plan as an alternative is terrible, terrible policy. But the Republicans really didn't care. And Kathy, that's the answer on that.
All of your costs, I'm hearing it, your gas, your groceries, your housing, and now your healthcare are skyrocketing. People cannot afford to live comfortably. Folks are telling us all the time. And we just said, let's do something. Let's make people's lives easier. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle were like, nope, we're good. We're going to let them continue to keep paying. There was several votes over in the Senate. They eventually made it to the 60 vote threshold in the Senate. It came back to the House. And yesterday, the House voted. It was mostly a party line vote. There was a few crossovers. I voted no on the continuing resolution because, as I said, my constituents did not send me here to increase their costs.